From grand pageants to war for land, from a fascinated media and public to secret dealings and marriages with Hollywood celebrities, the royal family of the United Kingdom has held us spellbound for centuries. Today, their every statement and action is monitored and reported on to the masses. But it wasn't always this way. The origins and evolution of the royal family is an amazing tale of tears and bloodshed. It is a world of high religion and low political scandal. It is a story with more intrigue and drama than any Hollywood blockbuster, and has been told and retold. And yet, the whole royal system and history is a confusing world that most people, including the English, simply don't understand. In this film, we will unravel the legends, myths and history of a family that has us held within its mesmerising grip. What were the origins? What does it all mean? We will answer these and more questions and bring us up to date with the very latest births and marriages. It's time to enter the land of royalty. What do you imagine when you think of the royalty of Great Britain? Pageants, tradition, palaces, pomp and glorious regalia? Or do you think of undemocratic dictators who have no elected authority? Do you only think of them in their modern context? Or do you see a long line of monarchs stretching back to King Arthur and beyond? Whatever you imagine, you will be somewhere close to the truth, and paradoxically, way off the mark. For the history of the British royal family is one surrounded by the mystery of fiction, created lineages, rebranding, and the ups and downs of a very real human experience. There are good times and bad, war and peace, wealth and well more wealth. They have gone from total power to almost total figurehead status, and yet millions of people still see something special, almost superhuman in them. A divine line of leaders, empowered by a special bloodline ordained by God himself. Whatever you believe about the rights and wrongs of a single family holding such power, the truth is, their story is fascinating. We can only start at the beginning, and this is where a united England first emerged from the warring factions of the many minor kingdoms of a dark age. In the 9th century, there were many kingdoms in what is known as the Anglo-Saxon period: Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria and East Anglia. Wessex became the dominant force under Egbert. However, increasing raids from Vikings and a great invasion force came in 865. By 878, the Vikings had destroyed East Anglia, Northumbria and Mercia, and almost conquered Wessex. They fought back under Alfred the Great. A division of lands was agreed, and Alfred and the Vikings created East and West Mercia. new Viking attacks came and various battles ensued until eventually a united England emerged. One king or monarch of the land known as England, one ruler, one power, uniting the people against outside aggressors. And yet it can all appear very confusing to the outsider. Great Britain, England, Wales, Scotland. Are all these countries, nations? What is it all about? We have to start by understanding that Scotland and England were kingdoms in their own right. Wales, having been subjugated off and on, was a principality. This simply means it was forced to have a prince, not a king, and thus is not as powerful as the stronger neighbouring king of England. However, before England itself had a king, it was in fact made up of a number of smaller kingdoms such as Mercia. In simple terms, England, Scotland and Wales are separate countries, and united under the monarch they are called Britain. The United Kingdom now also includes Northern Ireland. The monarchy of England began with the work of King Alfred the Great in the 9th century. Then it all changed in 1707 under Queen Anne, when England united with Scotland and formed what is now known as Great Britain. From then on, the monarchs were no longer kings and queens of just England, but of Britain. In the meantime, the Principality of Wales had been incorporated into the Kingdom of England in the 13th century, with the firstborn male heir always taking the role of the Prince of Wales, until becoming king himself. This ties the two lands together in blood. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth I died without an heir, and so the King of Scotland, James VI, became James I of England and Scotland. James called himself the King of Great Britain, but no such kingdom existed in legislation until 1707, when Queen Anne created it. James was a Stuart, and Queen Anne would be the last of the line. Is all that clear? The simple way of looking at it is like this. An island, once made up of numerous separate kingdoms, eventually forms into one Great Britain under one monarch. In this way, the power of an island nation begins to grow. No longer do they war with each other. No longer can outsiders pick off sections of land for themselves. No longer does that old-fashioned system known as feudalism exist. Instead, a united front is shown to prospective invaders. Indeed, wealth grows and enables the British to reach out to the world, to begin an empire. This would not have been possible in a divided land. It was essential if Britain was to stand against the world, and some would say that the constant invasion of the islands forced the people to come together. Over the centuries, various monarchs fought battles against usurpers and claimants of the throne. Lancaster against York in the Wars of the Roses tipped the balance of power, as did numerous other occasions. In the 17th century, religion, hard times, and increased education forced a public revolt in the Civil War, and a king lost his head. The beheading of Charles I scared the hell out of many people, and the following darkness forced Parliament to beg Charles II to take back the throne. Never again would revolution occur in these lands. In 1714, the Queen of Great Britain, Queen Anne, died without children. She had been a Catholic, and by this time the British Parliament had no taste for them any longer. They chose the Hanoverians as the successors, via the line of the daughter of James I. George I came to the throne, the son of Sophia of Hanover. He was followed by George II, III and IV, who was then followed by William IV. And now we begin to emerge into the modern era with the granddaughter of George III, Queen Victoria. Here, the name of the royal family would eventually change from Hanover to Saxe-Coburg when Victoria marries Albert of Saxe-Coburg and their son, Edward VII, takes to the throne. As can be seen by the names, the monarchs of Great Britain were in fact part of a much wider European system of marriages between specific powerful families. Some would say this was to help peace, others that it was simply a method of maintaining power to the few. It was the early 20th century, and Britain was about to be drawn into one of the most bloody revolutions the world had ever seen, the First World War. George married Mary of Teck, a German name for a German lady. George V God Save the Queen, or King. There is only a minor role in actual government of the land, In law, the monarch delegates power to the elected government, who do their work in the name of the Crown. The monarch gives power to the hands of the elected members of Parliament in the House of Commons and the selected lords in the House of Lords. The Prime Minister of the House of Commons forms a cabinet, otherwise known as the Privy Council. They direct the armed forces, civil service, police, diplomatic and secret services. In fact, there are still some secret reports that the monarch sees before the Prime Minister himself. The courts of law are by constitution separate from the government. The religion of the land, the Church of England, has the monarch at its head. The monarch appoints many roles in government, including that of the Prime Minister elected by the people. Theoretically, the monarch could refuse to appoint the elected party leader. It is an unwritten convention that the monarch must appoint the individual who commands the majority of members in the House of Commons. The Prime Minister must attend the sovereign and is appointed to the role by the kissing of hands. No other formal gesture is required. Before a change in the law in 2011, the Queen had the power to dissolve Parliament and call fresh elections. There is a rule known as the royal prerogative. These are rules of convention where the monarch acts according to the advice from the Privy Council or Prime Minister. Every week, the Prime Minister and the monarch hold a meeting whereby decisions are made. There are no records of the meetings, which are held in secret. The monarch can give advice, but cannot make decisions. The powers include the appointment or dismissal of ministers, regulation of the civil service, issuing passports, making peace, making war, directing the military, and negotiating international treaties. The monarch is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, accredits ambassadors, receives diplomats from other nations, and summons Parliament. Before any law is brought into action, it must be approved by the monarch, known as royal assent. It is the role of the monarch to issue honours such as knighthoods, which are mostly granted by the Prime Minister. These include appointing members of the Order of the Garter and various other institutions. So what about homes? Where do the royals reside? The official residence of the sovereign is of course Buckingham Palace in London. It is here that the majority of state banquets, investitures and ceremonies take place. In addition to this, there is Windsor Castle, the largest occupied castle in the world. It is generally used during the weekends, Easter and Royal Ascot by the monarch. In Scotland, the official residence is known as the Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh. Historically, the Palace of Westminster and even the Tower of London were the main residences of English monarchs until Henry VIII acquired the Palace of Whitehall. Unfortunately, it was destroyed by fire in 1698 and the royal residency moved to St James's Palace. Buckingham Palace became the official residence in 1837. There are other palaces such as Clarence House and Kensington Palace, which are held for future rulers and cannot be sold. The monarch also privately owns Sandringham House in Norfolk and Balmoral Castle in Scotland. So how did we get to this point in history? How did we arrive at the modern British royal family? Where did they come from? By the 9th century, the land had been raided and settled by the Vikings. Emerging as a dominant force was the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex. Wessex was secured by Alfred the Great, who also dominated Mercia, and thereby assumed the title of King of the English. However, it was his son, Athelstan, who was to be the first true ruler over a united England. By the 11th century, the land was more stable, and this saw the invasion of William, the Duke of Normandy, in 1066, bringing political and social changes. William was succeeded by his sons, William II and Henry I. Following various political and violent battles, another Henry, Henry II, became the first Plantagenet king in 1154. Much of the Plantagenet family reign was marred by conflicts between the monarchy and nobility. In 1215, King John, a descendant of William the Conqueror, was to face one of the biggest challenges from nobility. He was forced to sign the Magna Carta, or Great Charter, which guaranteed the rights and liberties of the nobility. Two nobility-led wars followed, the second being against John's son, Henry III. The royals won this time. Henry's son, Edward I, came to the throne. He was very strong-willed and maintained royal power and conquered Wales. His son, Edward II, then proceeded to lose many royal powers to the nobility. In 1327, he was deposed and murdered by his wife. His son, Edward III, came to the throne and started a 100-year war with the French. His son, Richard II, again battled with the nobility, and while away in Ireland, his throne was taken by Henry Bolingbroke. Richard was deposed, imprisoned, and murdered. Henry became King Henry IV. He was, however, of the right blood, being a descendant of Edward III. His father was John of Gaunt, the Duke of Lancaster, and so the family became known as the House of Lancaster. Again, he himself was forced to battle against political plots. His son, Henry V, had a relatively peaceful reign, and so pursued the French war. He died in 1422, leaving his infant son, Henry VI, on the throne, and all the French gains were lost. Under his leadership, the House of Lancaster became very unpopular and was challenged by a descendant of Edward III, known as Richard, the Duke of York. York and Lancasters fought in a period known as the Wars of the Roses, the Red Rose of Lancaster against the White Rose of York. In 1461, Richard of York's son, Edward, took the throne and became Edward IV. The wars continued during the reigns of Edward V and Richard III, and the Lancasters finally won. They were led by Henry Tudor, who had a thin bloodline connection to royalty. He became Henry VII, and the House of Tudors began. He solidified the royal link by marrying Elizabeth of York, a true heir to the throne. His son, Henry VIII, would bring religious upheaval by breaking from the Catholic Church and establishing the Church of England. In 1553, Henry's son, Edward VI, died early, designating Lady Jane Grey as his heir. She lasted 9 days before Edward's half-sister, Mary, deposed her. Mary I married the Catholic King of Spain, Philip, and suddenly the Protestants were being persecuted. Mary died in 1558, and the Protestant half-sister, Elizabeth I, came to the throne. England would find stability and grew in world power. Elizabeth never married, and upon her death, the House of Tudor rule over the land ended. She was succeeded by the Scottish king and her first cousin twice removed, James I. His son, Charles I, would go on to lose the English Civil War and his head. The war between Parliament and the Crown may have ended with the monarch's death, but by 1660 Charles II was restored to the throne. Here, modern British politics begins, with deals struck to ensure Parliament's authority. Charles II died without heir, and his brother James, the Duke of York, took the throne. However, his Catholic background forced Protestants to beg James II's daughter, Mary, and her husband William of Orange to take the throne. James fled, and the reign of William and Mary began. The overthrow was known as the Glorious Revolution and culminated in the Bill of Rights in 1689, declaring for the first time that the English people had rights. It required future monarchs to be Protestants. By 1700, a crisis arose because Mary nor her sister Anne had any surviving children. Parliament passed the Act of Settlement, stopping the Catholics reclaiming the throne. The next related family in line were therefore William's family, the Hanoverians, and William's sister-in-law, Anne. In 1714, Anne was succeeded by her second cousin, George I. Various Georges and a William followed until Victoria came to the throne, and through the Saxe-Coburgs we arrive back at the present-day House of Windsor. As we can see, from the moment England became England, there has been a line of monarchs all claiming some form of legal right to rule the land under bloodline. It began with the Romans leaving the shores, the Vikings coming, and battles between families to secure power. In short then, the monarchy of England and much of Europe came about through the will and might of the strongest warrior elite of an aggressive group of invaders. Over time, nobles and parliamentarians extracted much of the power base for the partially elected government. And that is where we are to this day, a monarch at the head of state, an elected House of Commons, and a non-elected House of Lords. The majority of these can all trace their heritage back to a long line of the same. Power may have shifted around, but it is in fact the same families ruling the land that have always done so. And so we come to our modern royal family, the Windsors. Today they operate what is known as a shared monarchy. During the 20th century, the British Empire evolved into the Commonwealth of Nations. Before 1926, the British royal family had reigned over the Dominions, Crown Estates and the United Kingdoms. After 1926 and the Balfour Declaration, self-government was bestowed upon the Dominions. Now the Crown acted as a single monarch over each realm, rather than as a collective. In this way, the monarch of the British was now also monarch of various separate nations with separate governments. This is the Commonwealth of Nations. In 1936, George V died and was followed by Edward VIII. This was to become a short-lived reign of scandal. Edward announced his desire to marry the American divorcee and socialite Wallis Simpson. As the head of the Church of England, which opposed the marriages of divorcees, this caused a major problem. Edward abdicated, and his brother George VI came to the throne.
England's Day of Days. Westminster Abbey is the setting for the show of the century as peers arrive for the coronation of King George VI. The Archbishop of Canterbury, who is to crown the king. From Britain's far-flung dominions come their premiers. Members of the royal family come to play their roles in this glittering pageant, and the great crowd surging around the Abbey hail them with fervour. The carriage of state bring the Princess Royal and the Duchesses of Gloucester and of Kent. The arrival of the royal family is the signal for frenzied cheering from the crowd. The Queen Mother, who is their queen for so many years, is the idol of the British public, while the little princesses have captured every heart. Today is their big day of days, too, and they're enjoying every minute of it in round-eyed, childish wonderment. The big moment the crowd's been waiting for. The King and Queen leave Buckingham Palace on their way to the Abbey in the famous coach of state. The ornate golden carriage with its crystal windows, its colorful postilions, and its superb octet of matched gray horses. This coach, built in 1761, is the symbol of regal pomp and ceremony. The route of their majesties and their striking military escort, kings fighting men from all over the world, is along the Mall to Trafalgar Square and through Whitehall to the Abbey. And it's one prolonged roar for the entire 2 miles, the roar of the British Lion. Hundreds of thousands of throats in a roar of welcome and of allegiance. For hour after hour, the crowds have waited to see this great pageant of empire, many of them for 15 or 18 hours. And now, their reward, the king and his beautiful queen on their way to the coronation. The roar rises to a deafening din of cheers and exultant shouts of "Long live the king!" as the stagecoach nears the Abbey. The crowds massed here have seen peers and peeresses, foreign potentates, and visiting dignitaries from the 4 corners of the globe. But this is the supreme thrill. Like figures out of a storybook, the regal pair, with their elaborate state robes of satin, of velvet, and of miniver, leave their golden carriage for the next impressive act in this great dynastic drama, while in their ears ring an unprecedented ovation, ample proof of the popularity they enjoy.
In September 1939, Britain and the Dominions declared war on Nazi Germany.
Let's take up the British. They started from scratch, but both at home and abroad an army was growing. For not only Britain had declared war, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the whole British Commonwealth of Nations was also determined on victory over Hitlerism and all it stands for. And Britain had one weapon that was ready, the Royal Navy. Shortly after war was declared, it had swept German shipping from the high seas. And units of the British fleet were deployed at Suez, Malta, Gibraltar, in the Channel, and in the North Sea, blockading Germany. World conquest was impossible without running smack up against the rock called Britain.
Despite the frequent bombing raids, the king and his wife, known as the Queen Consort, remained at Buckingham Palace. On the 13th of September 1940, 2 bombs exploded in the courtyard of the palace, and it is said they narrowly missed death. The Queen said, "I am glad we have been bombed. It makes me feel we can look the East End in the face."
Madness possessed the German nation.
The royal family were even subject to the same rationing as the ordinary people. It is said that George developed the closest personal relationship in modern British history with the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill. Every Tuesday they would meet to discuss the war in secret. Throughout the entire war, the King and Queen made morale-boosting visits throughout the United Kingdom, visiting bomb sites and munition factories, and in the King's case, visiting military forces abroad. He visited France, North Africa, Malta, Normandy and southern Italy. They became a symbol of British resistance and were held in high esteem. In January 1946, George addressed the United Nations at their first assembly in London and reaffirmed our faith in the equal rights of men and women and of nations great and small. Following the war, England's empire was truly crumbling, and George became King of India instead of Emperor. But by 1950, India became a republic, and even this changed. Now the British monarchy was to become the head of the Commonwealth, covering those republic nations that desired no monarchy. There is no longer any power in the title. It is simply for ceremonial purposes and figurative. The heir to the throne, Princess Elizabeth, married her second cousin once removed, Philip Mountbatten, in 1947. Philip had been a prince of Greece and Denmark. His name, Mountbatten, was an adopted title due to his real titles, such as Oldenburg, sounding too German. However, even Mountbatten derives from Battenberg, a small town in Germany. Elizabeth became queen in 1952, and it was suggested she took the name the House of Mountbatten. However, when her grandmother, Queen Mary, heard of the suggestion, she had words with the Prime Minister, and so the name House of Windsor remained. Philip privately complained, "I am nothing but a bloody amoeba. I am the only man in the country not allowed to give his name to his own children." Elizabeth II became the head of the Commonwealth, Queen Regnant of 7 independent Commonwealth countries, including the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Pakistan and Ceylon. Over time the numbers have changed, with the removal of South Africa, Pakistan and Ceylon. She also became Queen of Jamaica, Barbados, Bahamas, Grenada, Papua New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Belize, Antigua, and several others. Elizabeth was born and raised in London. She was educated at home. Her public duties began early during the Second World War, when she served in the territorial service. She had 4 children, Charles, Anne, Andrew and Edward. Over her 60-plus years as the Queen, Elizabeth has seen many cultural and historical events, from the Falklands War with Argentina to the Troubles in Northern Ireland, from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to the assassination of Philip's uncle, Lord Mountbatten. There have also been moments of sadness when her son's wife, Princess Diana, died in a car crash, and moments of criticism as the public support for the royal family ebbed and flowed. In 1953, the Queen and Prince Philip embarked on a world tour. She became the first reigning monarch to visit Australia and New Zealand. There were huge adoring crowds everywhere they went. She remains the most widely travelled head of state in history. In 1957, due to political indecision and missing mechanisms within the Conservative Party, the Queen actually, and unusually, appointed a Prime Minister on the recommendations of the 1922 committee. The decision drew her first public critics, with accusations of her being out of touch. The accuser was publicly attacked himself. By 1965, the Conservative Party corrected their internal issues, and the Queen would never be called on again to make the decision. In 1957, she visited the United States and addressed the United Nations on behalf of the Commonwealth. On the same tour, she became the first monarch to officially open a Canadian parliamentary session. In 1981, at the official trooping of the colour ceremony, 6 shots were fired at the Queen as she rode down the Mall on her horse. The bullets were blank, and the 17-year-old who fired them received a 5-year prison sentence. In 1982, the Queen, as the head of the armed forces, saw her son, Andrew, go off to war against the Argentinians in the Falklands War. In the same year, she awoke in her bedroom at Buckingham Palace to find an intruder stood beside her. For 7 long minutes, the Queen sat and spoke calmly with him before the police arrived. In 1992, the Queen's son, Prince Andrew, and his wife Sarah divorced. Quickly afterwards, her daughter, Princess Anne, divorced her husband, Captain Mark Phillips. In a state visit to Germany, demonstrators threw eggs at the Queen. Windsor Castle was set ablaze and suffered terrible fire damage. Growing press scrutiny of royal finances and lifestyles were coming to a head. And then, as if the year couldn't get any worse, her son, Prince Charles, and his wife, Diana, formally separated. She said in her Christmas speech that it had been a horrible year. In 1995, the Queen advised Charles and Diana to divorce. A year later, the divorce took place. A year after that, and Diana was killed in a car crash. The failure to fly the flag at half-mast and the family's seclusion from the public gaze caused public anger. A day before Diana's funeral, the Queen held a live broadcast and spoke to her people. Anger subsided. In 2002, the Queen marked her Golden Jubilee and the nation celebrated. But darkness came again as the Queen Mother and her sister died. Nevertheless, Elizabeth embarked on a tour of her realms. In 2011, the Queen once again visited Australia. The press called it her farewell tour. The next in line to the throne was Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales. Charles was born in 1948 at Buckingham Palace. Using water from the River Jordan, he was baptised by the Archbishop of Canterbury. His various titles as Prince of Wales include the Duke of Cornwall, Earl of Chester, Duke of Rothesay, Earl of Carrick, Baron of Renfrew, Lord of the Isles, and Prince and Great Steward of Scotland. By tradition, Charles served in the Royal Air Force and Navy. Interest in the prince's love affairs were as intense as they had always been. His great uncle, Lord Mountbatten, advised him to have as many affairs as he could before settling down. Charles seems to have followed the advice, and a number of suitors came and went. One of those was a Sarah Spencer in 1977. While visiting her house, he also met her younger sister, Diana. Something seems to have happened to spark an interest, and Diana was accompanying Charles on visits to Balmoral and Sandringham. The press became interested, and soon Charles was being advised to take things further. He proposed formally in February 1981, and they married in July. It was a marriage the world would see as a fairy tale, and yet it turned out to be a tragedy. They had 2 children, William and Harry, but problems soon set in. It was evident to most onlookers that the marriage was in difficulty, and then Diana revealed that Charles was having an affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. Scandal after scandal emerged, and in 1992 their official separation was announced by the Prime Minister. They divorced in 1996, and a year later Diana died in a car crash. In 2005, Charles and Camilla announced their engagement and were later married. The succession to the throne today is governed by laws known as common law and statute. Common law is derived from examples and experience. Statute from laws created and written down in Parliament, by the monarch and elsewhere. Under common law, the crown was inherited by the firstborn male. It was also governed by the Act of Union from 1800, which states that the descendant must derive from the line of Hanover, not be a Roman Catholic or married to such. It also excluded the descendants of the abdicated King Edward VIII. The first 4 individuals in line for the throne and who are 21 or older may be appointed councillors of the state and can perform the monarch's duties. The monarch of the United Kingdom is also monarch of 15 other states within the Commonwealth of Nations. It is convention law that all 16 sovereign states must agree any alteration to the line of succession. This they did in 2011, when the law changed to include the eldest females in the line of succession if born after 2011. It also allowed the monarch to be married to a Roman Catholic. Today, the royal family of the United Kingdom is known worldwide, often appearing like Hollywood A-listers. What they say, do, and even where becomes tomorrow's news. Speculation on who killed Diana, or when the monarchy will change hands, is often news. And yet, just as it has always been, much of the news is controlled, edited and fed to the public to maintain an air of regal superhuman status.
The cheer. Its warmth is most evident. The Duke and Duchess of Gloucester. Then the royal coach draws up, and from it out step the King, the Queen and the Princesses. A high spot this for the crowd. Royal farewells begin. To be plainly seen in all of them is sincerity. There's a catch at my throat as I see the Princesses curtsy to their grand. Even the train seems impatient. The royal travellers go aboard. Their daughters go with them as far as Portsmouth. The arrival at Portsmouth. More meetings and partings. This is a big moment for the city. We're run very high. All possible points of vantage are strongly held by many more people than they can easily accommodate. And the King Admiral goes very good sob. The air is heavy with emotional loyalty.
Should we still have people born into positions of power in the 21st century? Does having such a figurehead really bring wealth and prosperity to the nation? Did it stop tourists visiting Paris when the royals were taken from power? Is it democratic? These questions and more will be around for as long as the royals, and regardless of your opinion or mine, they do give us a fascinating, real-life soap opera. And now we must mention the latest and possibly one of the most glamorous additions to the royal family, Meghan Markle. Today she is known as the Duchess of Sussex, but she was born Rachel Meghan Markle on August 4th, 1981. She is an American-born member of the British royal family, but before her marriage to Prince Harry, she was a film and television actress. She was born and raised in Los Angeles, California, attending private schools in the Hollywood area. During her studies at Northwestern University in Illinois, from which she graduated in 2003 with a degree in theatre and international studies, she began playing small roles in American television series and films. In 2011, she appeared in her best-known role as Rachel Zane on the American legal drama series Suits. In 2017, Markle announced her engagement to Prince Harry, grandson of Queen Elizabeth II, and retired from acting. She became the Duchess of Sussex on their marriage on May the 19th, 2018.